Alright, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share with you in 5 steps, 5 questions that I ask myself, how I quit my addictions. Before I get into that, I just want to share with you Gabor Mate's definition of addiction. And that is any behavior that gives a person temporary relief and pleasure, but also has negative consequences in the long term, and to which the individual will return time and time again. And so the reason I'm sharing that definition with you is because addiction, I used to think, was just limited to, sex, drugs, alcohol. But with this definition and just reading about Gabor's work, I realized, oh no, addiction can be anything. Because addiction is not about the external thing or behavior that you're doing. It is an internal process. So the first question is, why the addiction, right? Why is there this internal process that I have that time and time again will have me come back to behaviors that aren't serving me? And so for me, these behaviors were sex addiction and drug addiction. And to a certain extent, when I was in high school, I would say alcohol dependency. And so why is there this internal process, right? And through Gabor's work and through a bunch of different books and going to therapy and all of these things, what I learned was that there is an underlying emotion or feeling of pain, of discomfort that I am using these behaviors to escape from. The second question is, why the pain, right? Why the discomfort? I wasn't always like this. I didn't always have pain and discomfort that drove my decisions. Somewhere along the way, I developed this pain and I developed these wounds. And at the same time, I developed behaviors to cope with those wounds. The problem is that for me, because I developed these wounds at such an early age, the behaviors that I developed to cope with them were a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old's ideas for solutions. And so they might have helped me back then, but they're not helping me anymore, right? And so what I mean by that is like, I knew that I got uncomfortable in social environments, right? If I went to a party, I was uncomfortable being sober when I was a teenager. But I didn't know where to look for answers for what do I do, right? I grew up in Mexico. And when I told my dad, the first time I told my dad I wanted to go to therapy, he said, therapy is for crazy people. And so that was just kind of my reality. Nobody was talking about this. School wasn't teaching me about it. So I kind of had to just figure out like, all right, well, I'm just going to do the thing everyone else is doing, drink, and that seems to help. And so at the time, it helped me solve the problem that I had. And so why the pain is because there are these wounds that I developed. The third question is, where is the trauma, right? Where are these wounds? I've already mentioned that I developed some of these in high school and when I was 9, 10, 11, 13 years old. But that's not something that I just sat down and was like, where are the wounds? And it was like, boom, here's one, here's one, here's one. It was like a process of deep investigating into my past and learning about all of these concepts and then deciding, which ones do I feel like pertain to my history. And so there's neglect, there is abandonment, there are, unmet needs, self-betrayal. These were all wounds that I developed at a certain age. And so when I read about these concepts, when I read about neglect and about parents not being emotionally available for a child, I think to myself, okay, does that resonate? Right? And I remember the time when I was 9 years old and maybe I wanted to talk to my parents about my girlfriend at the time, but I was so afraid of how they would respond that I decided I'm going to keep my girlfriend a secret from everyone because I don't want to know how my parents are going to respond, because enough has happened at that point in my life at 9 years old that I don't trust my parents anymore. So I'm just going to not have that emotional support. I'm going to experience that neglect. And that ends up leading to self-betrayal, right? Because as I grow older, my parents are no longer responsible for me, right? So if my whole life as a 24, 25, 26-year-old man, I am now keeping my life a secret from everyone, which I did for a long time, that is no longer my parents' responsibility, but that is now a behavior that I learned when I was younger, right? I'm going to worry so much about how everyone else is going to respond that I'm going to betray myself in the process and not ask for the support that I need. And man, I mean, still to this day, I am finding new wounds and new trauma, right? It's a long process and it's an ongoing process. But once I found enough of them, I decided, okay, now I've got to work them. I've got to heal them. I've got to figure out a new way to live life because this is no longer serving me, right? Keeping my life a secret from everyone is only making me miserable emotionally. And it's manifesting all of this illness and disease and just low energy and low motivation and the poor life conditions and my addictions, right? If I'm hiding everything from everyone, well, marijuana will help me, because marijuana's not going to say a fucking word. Marijuana's just going to help me dissociate from all of the things that I'm struggling with. But so the fourth question is, how do I heal from trauma, right? I developed this wound when I was 9 years old. Well, how does that help me, right? What do I do now? How do I go back in time and heal something that happened that long ago? And the answer to this one, I mean, it can be boiled down to learning how to do the things that you didn't know how to do back then, right? And I'll take it a step further and say that most of those things that you're learning how to do, for me, it was feeling my emotions. So just a basic example is like when let's use that example of I'm 9 years old, I have a girlfriend and I'm sad because something happened with her, but I don't feel like I can talk to my parents, right? This isn't fact. I don't feel like my parents care enough about me to help me through this. But feeling that is too painful because if my parents don't care about me, what does that mean about my life at 9 years old? So instead of feeling that, I escaped and I found other ways to cope, right? I played video games all day long and I watched TV so that I wouldn't have to feel those experiences and I wouldn't have to carry those emotions. But as a grown man, I now, with that realization, have to go back and realize that was my life, that was my reality at 9 years old. And I have to feel the abandonment and the sadness that 9-year-old kid didn't feel. And I have to connect with that 9-year-old. I know it sounds crazy, man, but I literally have to connect with that 9-year-old me again and regain his trust. So the fifth question and the final question is, once I am starting this process of healing, ideally I'm going to be letting go of my addictions, right? And so that's going to make my life look very different. If I go from smoking weed and watching videos 3 hours a day and then doing all these things to distract myself from my pain, if I'm no longer doing that, then what am I doing, right? What does my life look like without my addiction? Well, for me, that meant the needs that my addictions are meeting, I need to meet in healthier ways that aren't negatively affecting my life. So, an example of that for me is marijuana. It served a purpose. it's not all bad, right? People say addiction is this terrible thing and it's evil. It's like, no, man, addiction is helping people to survive. Marijuana was giving me a sense of adventure, and marijuana was helping me to, even if it wasn't helping me feel my sadness, it was helping me feel something, right? I felt fucking paranoid every single time I did. And so what do I do now now that I don't have marijuana? How do I meet that need of adventure? And how do I still feel like I'm alive? There's all kinds of ways to do that, right? What I've chosen, the things that have worked for me are, I will go for an hour-long nature walk every single day that my life allows for it. I won't take my phone with me. I won't take my watch with me. I'll go shirtless in flip-flops so that I can feel like a kid again. And I'm exploring the world again. And there's nowhere else that I need to be but on the walk, right? Because a lot of times when I smoked weed, that was what I wanted to feel, right? It's like I get home from work and I'm stressed out and I feel this pressure to create and to write and to do more. And there's, at the same time, there's this 9-year-old kid inside of me that's like, hey man, what about, that spontaneity? And what about that just doing something for the fuck of it and not caring about all these responsibilities? Well, if I get high, then I would just write poetry, right? For like an hour and a half or 2 hours, or I would just disconnect and listen to music. And eventually it's like those things in and of themselves aren't bad. It's not bad to want those things. It's just the way I decided to go about it wasn't serving me. But going for a nature walk, it's like, okay, well, that's now providing me with vitamin D. It's providing me with clarity of mind. It's providing me with physical exercise. I'm seeing smiling faces on the trail. It's providing me with a sense that I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by a community of people. Whereas with marijuana, it was like, I'm alone in my bedroom. And I feel bad that I'm doing this thing that I'm doing. And so really there's a number of other things that I do, but it all boils down to creating that sense of adventure, right? And creating pockets of time in my life where I can say, responsibilities, take a break. I need right now to just be about this moment. And it doesn't matter if this moment creates or produces something. This is just about the sense of adventure and the sense of spontaneity and reconnecting with my youth. Now, before I end the video, there's one very important thing about all of this. And it took me several years to learn this. And that is that these new behaviors, they can also become addictions. Because again, the addiction is not external. The addiction is internal. An example is like, if I go from smoking weed and craving and being in this sense of adventure all day long, right? Because I was high all the time. If I go from that to walking 5 hours a day and saying no to friends because no, I've got to go on my 5-hour walk, and missing work or getting late to work because I'm on my walk, if it basically the same thing, right? So the most important takeaway of this whole video for me is that it is not about the activities I am doing. It is about how I am relating to those activities. And that's why, whenever I have conversations with people who are trying to quit their addiction, and they'll ask me, right, like, well, but if I stop doing this, then what do I do, right? Because I know that if I quit my addiction, that in and of itself isn't going to solve my problem. It's like, exactly. Because it's not about changing anything external, right? That's going to be a byproduct of something else. That's going to be a byproduct of changing the internal. So anyway, I hope that this video helps you or touches you in some way. And if there's any other questions or anything that you're struggling with in regards to addiction, leave a comment below. And who knows, I might have some experience with that, and maybe it'll be my next video. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful week, and hopefully I will see you next time.